Hey everybody, it's your girl KurlyKass. If you're new here, welcome to my channel where I share my experiences as a mother, mental health clinician, and curly girl. So it has been a few weeks since I have posted. Things have been absolutely insane these last couple of weeks. Then I recorded a video and then I didn't like it, so then I deleted it. So I've been a little bit of a mess. But we're back and we are going to be continuing with my breastfeeding series. So today I'm going to be talking about pumping. So pumping is a form of breastfeeding and it is actually something that has helped me a lot in my breastfeeding journey. And pumping can be a lot more complicated than it seems. I think the whole idea of breastfeeding seems super simplified, but it's actually way more complicated. I wish somebody had broken down to me and explained to me a little bit more before I started my breastfeeding journey, because I could have saved myself a lot of trouble in the very beginning had I known some of the things that I'm about to share with you today. So this video is going to be all the things that I wish that I knew before I started my pumping journey. So one of the first things that I wish that I knew about pumping before I got started was that there are endless options. There are hundreds of options of pumps that you could choose from. So there are pumps that your insurance will cover. There are pumps that you can get through your insurance, but then you have to pay a fee if you decide to upgrade or if your insurance doesn't cover it. There are hundreds of pumps on Amazon. There are hundreds of pumps that moms resell on Facebook, on Marketplace, on pumping groups. It is insane. Like, the pumping game and breastfeeding game is a way of life. So before I started my pumping journey, I wish that I had done a lot more research on some of the pumps that are out there today. So there are wireless pumps, there are pumps with no tubing, there are pumps with rechargeable batteries, there are pumps that need to be plugged into the wall in order for you to use them. There are so many different types of pumps, and it really just depends on you and your lifestyle and what's going to work best for you. So one thing that I really wish that I did was do more research on the types of pumps that there are out there before I chose the one that I did, because I ended up really not liking the first one that I chose. And then luckily I switched jobs and also got new health insurance through them. So then I was able to get a second pump about 3 months into my breastfeeding journey. The second thing that I wish that I knew about pumping is that it is not any more comfortable or less comfortable than breastfeeding is. So at times I feel like I thought pumping was way more comfortable for me than breastfeeding was. And then there were times that breastfeeding was just way more comfortable than pumping was. So it just kind of depends on your mood, where you're at, how your baby is latching. There are so many variables, and I think that it can kind of fluctuate throughout your breastfeeding journey. And that's something that I wish that I knew, is that it is going to be just as painful, if not sometimes more or sometimes less painful, than actually breastfeeding your baby. So I have my breast pump here today, and I'm just going to kind of show it to you. I'm not going to do too much of an in-depth review about it or talk too much about it. I can do a separate video on that. So I'm just going to kind of show you exactly what it looks like and what some of the parts are. So this is my pump. I have the Spectra S1. So I chose this one. There are actually two Spectras. And Spectra is the brand, in case you didn't know. So it says it right here. This is the Spectra, and these are all of the buttons and all of the functionality. Another thing that I wish that I knew about pumping was that almost every pump has the same functionalities and they have very similar features. So they almost all of them look very much alike. There are some exceptions to this, of course, and some of the exceptions are when you get wireless pumps. And when I say wireless, I should really say ones that don't need tubing. So this is the tubing. And if you're a real newbie to pumping, I can kind of break it down to you a little bit more. So the tubing is what goes plugged into the pump, and then it goes plugged into these, which go plugged in right here. And then this is where your nipple goes, and this is what connects the machine to the flange. This is the flange, which is where your nipple goes into. And then once you hit start, I don't know if you can hear that. Yeah. Once you hit start, as you can see, this little, I don't know if you can see that moving. Maybe if I do it this way. Yeah, if you can see this moving back and forth, that is what gives you the suction to start your letdown, which will eventually stimulate your milk to come down. One thing that I wish that I knew is that almost every pump is created the same as far as the aesthetics go and as far as the parts go. So almost every single pump that has tubing, which is 90% of them, look like this. So they all have the tubing, they all have these parts, it all looks very similar to this. Some of the parts are a little bit smaller on certain pumps, but some of them are about this size. Which brings me to my next point. Something else that I wish that I knew about pumping before I got started was that most of these parts, you can hack them. That's what they call them on these mom groups, is that you can hack some of these parts with other pumping parts. So what I mean is, if I have a Spectra brand, I can go on Amazon and there's a company that makes parts that fit my Spectra pump exactly the same as a Spectra would for cheaper. Or when I had my Lancino, one thing that I didn't know was that some Medela parts, which is another pumping brand, fit into the Lancino part. So when I needed to change flanges because my flanges were too big, I was able to go to Target and get the Medela parts to fit my Lancino pump without having to worry about waiting for the shipment to come in, without worrying about the price that it would be, and I didn't have to directly order from Lancino. So that was something that I really wish that I knew in the very beginning, was that I can buy different parts from different companies as long as they fit for my particular brand that I have. Which brings me to the next point. One thing that I wish that I knew was that these pumping parts are not going to last you your entire breastfeeding journey. So I just assumed, which was very stupid of me, I really just assumed that these parts were good for your entire journey. One thing that I didn't know was that these parts are gonna go out at least every 3 months, depending on how you use them, how you clean them. I've broken a couple of parts myself by accident, dropping them, going too hard with the sponge when I clean them. So it just kind of depends. But one thing that you definitely need to know is that these parts are not going to last you your entire breastfeeding journey. At some point, you're gonna need to get replacement parts. For example, right now, the parts that I have on my Spectra are not Spectra parts. So originally I had been using the Spectra parts that come with the pump. But I slowly realized that I had the wrong flange size, which I'll get into in a minute. And also some of the parts had broken on me, and I can kind of show you that too. So if you look at this, it's very faint, but this is the original Spectra cup. That's pretty much the only part that I had that was original to my pump. Are these bottles. Everything else that I use is not an original Spectra, and it works perfectly fine. So one part that I did have to replace was the duckbill. So this broke on me because I was using a little bottle cleaner and I went way too hard when I was going to clean it, and I kind of ripped a hole in it, and so it didn't work anymore. And then I accidentally broke one of these once because when I took it off to clean it, I accidentally dropped it and it cracked. And so can't use that anymore. I've had to order pump parts probably at least 2 times. And if I include the Lancino, probably 3 times within this entire journey, and it's been about 8 months. So it wasn't super expensive, but it was a little bit inconvenient, and I was definitely a little bit nervous in the beginning because I didn't know how long it would take for the parts to come. Obviously, if you're pumping, you cannot go more than a couple hours without pumping, and so that was something that I was really worried about. But what I didn't realize was that, number one, you can find most of these parts on Amazon that fit for your pump, even if it's not the original parts for the company that you order from, which was amazing. And if you have Amazon Prime, it's even better because you can get it the next day or 2 days later. Also, if you have parts that are compatible with Medela, you can easily go to Target or Walmart because they typically sell Medela parts, which are a little bit more of a common brand. Spectra, I haven't seen many of the parts at Target. I think the only parts that I've ever seen at Target are like the tubing. So yeah, if your parts can be hacked with Medela, that's way more convenient because you can just run to Walmart or Target and get it there. The next thing that I wish that I knew about pumping was that every single one of these parts plays a role in pumping. And it sounds really obvious, but when I tell you that I didn't know if this duckbill wasn't on properly, that my milk would not come down and the suction would not come out, I would be lying. So I specifically remember one day I was pumping and I had quickly put my pump back together after I had washed it, and it was time for me to pump, and I'm pumping and I don't feel any suction on my left breast, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I was already upset because my cat decided to chew on my tubing. This is probably the third set of tubing that I've had to buy because my cat thinks that it's his chew toy. And if you can see, I'm like, they're so uneven right now because he's chewed on them. And I've had to cut them at least twice. So this is my third set of tubing in 8 months because he likes to chew on them. So I was already upset because I found out that he chewed on them again, and I had to cut them even shorter, which is very inconvenient because now you have just like this much distance between you and the pump. And it doesn't really allow you a lot of room to be able to do things while you're pumping. So I was already pissed off because of that. And then I'm like, why isn't this left side suctioning right now? Like, why can't I feel anything? And I'm checking the pump and I'm turning it off and I'm turning it on and I'm starting to freak out. I'm starting to get really annoyed. And I look and I'm not seeing the duckbill part. I'm not seeing this part open and close like it normally does. And when I open it, it's because it wasn't secured all the way on. So you would be very surprised at how something that minor would affect the ability of your pump to be able to stimulate your milk. So I wish that I knew that before. If one thing is not right, it's not going to work. So something to keep in mind. Another point that brings me to these pumping parts, I wish that I knew how absolutely annoying it is to clean these parts. When I tell you, it is the most tedious thing to do, especially because when you're pumping at least 8 to 9 times a day. That means you have to take this apart and clean it 8 to 9 times a day. And it doesn't seem like very much, but let me break it down to you. You have to take this off, you clean this bottle. Then you have to take this off, you clean this part. Then you have to take this off, right? You clean this part, inside, in here, all around, in there, around here, the outside. Then here comes this part. Then you have to take this apart, clean this side, and then clean this. Twice for both pumps, 8 to 9 times a day. And if you're exclusively pumping, then you are pumping even more than that. So every 2 hours, this is what you're doing. And then you set them out to dry. And when they're all dry, then you get to put it all back together again, just like this, and just slowly make your way over to maybe pump if you have time, if your baby hasn't woken up from its nap already. Okay, now I'm ready to go. Now, a pumping hack that I wish that I knew in the very beginning of my journey was how to pump or express milk on the other boob when your baby is eating. So in the very beginning of my breastfeeding journey, I was obsessed, absolutely obsessed with building my milk stash. I've sort of calmed down recently, but in the very beginning, it was all I could think about. It was all that I was focused on. And when I say a milk stash, I mean I needed to build a freezer stash full of frozen milk because I knew that I was going to be going back to work in 3 months, and I knew that I wanted to keep exclusively breastfeeding my baby. And so that meant that there had to be milk available for his dad to feed him. And that meant that I had to have an abundance of milk because in the beginning, you don't know how much your baby is going to consume on a day-to-day basis. Like, you think that you know, and then they go through growth spurts. They go through times when they're hungrier than other days. And so it's really hard to kind of gauge how much milk they're going to be drinking in any given day. So that was something that I was absolutely obsessed with. And so one thing that I did to help boost my milk production and to also help build my stash was that when I would breastfeed Avery on one side, I would take my pump and I would pump on the other side. It is incredibly difficult to be able to hold a baby, even if you're using a bobby pillow, to hold a baby, breastfeed them on one side, and keep your pump on the other side, holding it there while you're holding a baby, all at the same time. And as they get bigger, it just gets more and more difficult because now he squirms and he kicks and he flails his arm and he sees the other pump and he wants to grab it. He thinks everything is his. So it's really, really hard to be able to do that. So one hack that I wish that I knew was to be able to use this bad boy here. So this is a haka. So a haka is something that you use to be able to collect your milk. So it's not exactly a manual pump, which is a whole nother thing. A manual pump is literally a pump that you use manually, like you put it on your breast and you squeeze the milk out yourself. This is amazing because it completely cuts out any manual labor that you need to do. All you need to do is latch your baby on one side and latch this on your breast on the other side, and it literally just collects the milk that is going to come out from your letdown. So instead of having to hold a pump on your breast, you can put this and it stays by itself. And instead of losing the milk that you would normally get from a letdown when you're breastfeeding a baby on one side and just like letting it soak up into your shirt or your bra, you can collect it with this. And so on any given day, I might get anywhere from 3 to 4 ounces on one side, which is amazing. So that used to be how much he would drink in one sitting. Now he drinks 6 ounces because he's 8 months old. But in the very beginning, that was amazing because then I would only have 2 ounces left to fill up a freezer bag and put it in my freezer. So the way that this works is that this is the part where your breast is gonna go. Your nipple is gonna go inserted right in here. So you're going to fold this over. It's silicone too, so it's super comfortable. It doesn't hurt at all. It's not like a hard plastic or anything. You fold this over, looks like this. And then you squeeze the air out to make it look just like this. I think I can actually use the inside of my arm. So fold this over, squeeze the air out, attach it right here, and then fold the silicone part over, and then it sticks. And that's how it stays on your breast, just like that. And imagine the skin that's going into, so imagine the skin that's going into here, that's just your nipple. And it works very similarly to a pump. The only difference is that it's not the constant suction. It's just this one suction that's getting all of your milk to pull down. So it's just kind of like if your baby's doing one really long suck, that's what it feels like. And so if this ever becomes loose, you can always just squeeze again and get it retightened. It got way tighter than it was the first time. So this is something that I wish that I knew about before I started my pumping journey, because instead of wrestling with my infant and also wrestling with a pump, trying to keep it on straight, I would have just been able to use this. Another thing that I wish that I knew before I started my pumping journey is I wish that I knew how uncomfortable it would be to get started. So what I mean by that is I wish that I knew how incredibly uncomfortable it would be when it's time to pump. So you have to maneuver your shirt. You have to have the right bra on to be able to pump. I look cute right now and I'm wearing a strapless bra for this shirt, but you better believe that after this video is over, I'm putting back my nursing bra on. So this is all for the aesthetic of this video. This is not normally how I go about my day. I go about my day with a nursing bra that is about 8 inches thicker than this strap right here, because it is the only way that I'm going to be able to breastfeed my baby, hold up my pump, and do all the things that I need to do during the day. It's not cute, but it is what it is. This is all for show. It is super uncomfortable to even get your nipple in the right placement in this thing. So I feel like sometimes it takes me like 5 minutes just to be able to take my boob out, put my nipple in the right way that it needs to fit, because if you don't put it in the right way, it will be suctioning in all crazy types of directions. So it will be suctioning to the left. It'll be hitting the right side of the tube. It'll be going too deep. It's so uncomfortable too. Like it feels like when your baby isn't latched properly and your baby starts sucking, and if you've had this happen to you before, you know what I'm talking about. The pain is incredible. So you need to be able to make sure that your nipple is in the right placement in this thing before you start pumping. Because if not, it's just gonna suck. And your pump is not gonna be able to get the milk out because your nipple is gonna be facing down, or it's gonna be to the left or to the right, and it's not gonna be straight head on to be able to get all the milk out. Which brings me to my next point. Yes, pumping should be uncomfortable, but no, pumping should never be painful. So one thing that I wish that I knew that I didn't know before was that if your pump is painful, you're doing something wrong. So it means that you're either not using the right size flange, or the pump is not on the right mode for you. It might be too strong. The suction level might be too strong. There are several things that could be going wrong if you are having a really painful experience with pumping. It should be uncomfortable, but not painful. So I wish that I knew this in the beginning. Like when I first started pumping and breastfeeding, of course, like my nipples felt so raw. Like they were in pain all the time, and pumping literally would make me cringe because of how painful it was. All of that time that I was pumping, probably within like the first 3 months, and I was pumping every hour the first 3 months. I wish that I knew that it didn't need to hurt that bad, and I only stuck with it because I really wanted to breastfeed my baby. One thing that I found out that I was doing wrong was that I was using the wrong flange size. So when you're looking at a pump, this is the flange. So this whole opening right here is the flange. So they come in different sizes, you guys. Who knew this? Like, I didn't know this, and I wish that I knew this in the very beginning. These come with different sizes. So it's just like wearing shoes that are too tight. It's just like wearing shoes that are too big. You're not gonna be able to go anywhere. Your feet are gonna be flapping all up in the shoes. Or if they're too tight, your toes are gonna be killing you. Your feet are gonna be killing you. And that's exactly the way that it works with a pump, is imagine wearing the wrong shoe size all day long. Imagine wearing the wrong shoe size and going to climb Mount Everest. That's how it feels when you wear the wrong flange size. So that is like something that I really, really wish that I knew in the very beginning. That's like probably number one, and I should have started with that, but I didn't. So, and the flange sizes go based off of your nipple size. They have tons of videos on this. They have tons of things that you can Google as resources for how to measure your nipple size. There are ways to do it before pumping, after pumping, you know, to look at how swollen it is. But the way that I sized my nipple was that I used the coin test. So I actually found this chart on one of my Facebook groups that I'm on for pumping, and it was really helpful. And it basically talked about how to measure the size of your nipple using a quarter, a dime, a nickel, or a penny. You could measure the distance between your nipple and your breast. They come in millimeter sizes. So they come in 32, 34. The most common sizes that you'll see are like 32 and 28. And I had no idea that those were way too big. Like I now use, I feel like this is like, does it say it on here? It does. I'm using a size 19. Guys, I was using a size 28. Like, that's like me wearing a size 10 when I'm really a size 6. It's insane. And I wish that I knew this before I started my pumping journey, because I would have been able to measure my nipple. I wouldn't have had to deal with all of the pain, all of the swelling, the redness, the rawness. Like, the last thing that I wish that I knew about pumping is that you need to be on a schedule. So in order for you to be able to pump effectively, to build a milk stash, to be able to feed your baby, to boost your milk production, you need to be on a very strict schedule. And so in the very beginning, I had no idea how to even make a schedule for myself, because when you Google a good pumping schedule, all that shows up is pump every 2 hours. That sounds good on paper, but when you actually go to apply it, they don't talk about that added variable of if you're breastfeeding your baby. So if you're breastfeeding your baby and your baby's eating every 2 hours, which 2 hours are you supposed to pump? This was something that I wish that I knew how to navigate in the very beginning, because I was really struggling in the beginning to know when I should pump, when I'm breastfeeding, how often, how much later after I'm done breastfeeding. It was super confusing for me. And once I got myself going on a good schedule and I was able to set myself up for success, it was a walk in the park. But in the very beginning, probably for the first like month and a half, maybe 2 months, it was really, really difficult for me to be able to build up my milk stash, because I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. And I had no idea when I should be pumping, when I should be breastfeeding, how long afterwards, if my baby just ate, how much milk is gonna come out. It's so confusing. So I'm gonna do a separate video on how to set up a pumping schedule that works for me, and hopefully that'll work for you. And in the next video, I'm gonna show you my milk stash that I am so proud of, because it took me so much effort and so much work to do it, and I just want to be able to share all of my tips and tricks with all of you guys so that you can also have a successful breastfeeding journey. So if you have any questions, please feel free to comment below. Let me know what other things you want me to talk about, what you need me to clarify, if there's anything that's confusing for you, what things you wish you knew before you started your breastfeeding journey, whether you're an exclusive pumper, exclusive breastfeeder, or if you're like me and you do a little bit of both. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please hit the like button, hit subscribe so that you can tune into my weekly videos. Thanks, guys.